Hey everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of my A-level art sketchbook tour. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, I'll leave a link in the description so you can watch that first and then come back here when you're done. So I started off with presenting some new photos I took alongside some annotations. Then I tried out underpainting. So for the top half I used complementary colours, and at the bottom I used undertones. And then on the right page I had drawn/painted sections of a photo I took, and for that I used acrylic paint and colouring pencils. I also did an observational drawing of an apple core, and this isn't my best work, but I think I captured the texture of the bite marks pretty well. I did a background experiment, and I just painted both of my developments and split the background into 4 so I could try like 4 different techniques, and I used a range of things like painting, collages of receipts and wrappers as well. So I really liked the idea of the receipts in the background, so I decided to repaint the bag with the receipts in the back. And I thought it also ties in well with the message of excessive consumerism. And for the food waste side of things, I thought that no background would be best. I honestly couldn't think of a better background to do, and this looks pretty good, so I was quite happy with this. So this is a little font experiment I did. I thought this would be appropriate since I'm now using text in my piece. I essentially played around with different styles, mark making techniques and media as well. My message had changed from the beginning, and I wanted to clarify that in my sketchbook, so that's kind of the purpose of this spread. And I also did some drawings using biro, colouring pencils and sketch pencils. So here is my first final design, which is essentially eggshells in a china bowl. I used acrylic paint only in this piece, although in this draft I painted the eggshells a tad too red, but I wrote that down in my annotations and I fixed that in the actual final outcome. And this is my second final design, with the receipts collage as the background and acrylic paint for the main piece. This is how my first outcome turned out, and the colour of the eggshells looks so much better here. It reads soil food with soul crossed out, as an attempt to do a bit of wordplay because compost is like food for the soil. Moving on to my second outcome, here you can see the bits of receipts sticking out behind the paint, which I thought was a nice touch. And I also really liked how the painting turned out here, especially the colours I used on the plastic bag, as well as the receipts background. I think it conveys the message of excessive consumerism and the impact it has on the environment really well. Overall, I was pleased with both of the outcomes. I felt that my message for both was clearer than it was before. However, for my eggshells outcome, my proportions were slightly off, which is crazy considering I've drawn and painted this so many times. Particularly the plate. Like, it wasn't a circle or an oval, it was just wonky. I probably should have used a compass, but you live and you learn, I guess. So at this point, I decided to narrow down and focus on the food waste message. This way it can have my full attention and I can experiment a lot with it as well. And for this experiment, I used soil as the background, and it didn't turn out that good. I mean, it was a good idea in my head, but the execution was just not there. So to redeem myself, I did a few other background experiments using a composting magazine I had and some newspaper, which is also compostable. I also completed a bit of contextual research just to find out what can be composted and what can't. From the research that I did, I saw other food that can be composted and thought it would make more sense to go beyond eggs and showcase the range of items that could be added into a compost. And on the right, I combined all my new ideas so far to create this piece using acrylic paint for the bowl and its contents and a newspaper collage for the background. I completed some more contextual research about composting to understand more about how it works and its benefits. I was able to get a couple of pictures of my friend's compost to include in this spread as well. So I found that tea bags could be composted, so I drew some tea bags using biro and painted them with acrylic paint to become familiar with its shapes and colours. And then I decided to explore with different media, so I did a development with oil pastels, but this didn't turn out too great. Perhaps the scale was too small, so it was difficult to get the detail, but I reckon that my technique was not refined enough to achieve the realism I was anticipating. And these are some more products of media exploration. On the left, I used watercolour, and on the right, I used colouring pencils. I'm actually not that experienced with using watercolour, so I was quite surprised that this piece turned out alright. But as for the colouring pencil side, I feel like it just looks a bit two-dimensional. And in the end, I decided to just stick with acrylic paint anyway. Okay, so for this, I was literally just painting on leaves and printing them all over the page. But essentially, I wanted to try out different techniques for my piece, so I thought that I would try printing out. Although for a lot of them, I think I didn't have enough paint on the actual leaf, but this was super fun to do anyway. Then I did another font experiment. I did this on my iPad, writing the same phrase and using the same colours each time, just with a different style. Also, the image on the bottom right that has a sort of speckle texture. You may have seen this similar sort of texture throughout my book. I sort of made up this technique when I was like in year 8, and I basically get those laminating pouches and print whatever mirrored image I want on the sheet. And since I have an ink printer, the ink won't dry on the laminating pouch, so when I stamp it on paper, it creates this speckle texture, and it's such a useful technique because it can help fill up the space quite quickly. This is an extension of the font experiment where I practiced writing the font on the tea bags, and honestly at this point I was just refining the smaller details and techniques in my piece. And these are my second favourite observational drawings I did throughout the two books. My first favourite being the crumpled cans, and oh my god, this turned out so good. The attention to detail and the smoothness in the sketching. Normally I'm not consistent with how well I draw, so I was really happy that this page turned out the way it did. Moving on, I did a composition experiment. So I was just figuring out how to lay out everything, particularly the text, because I wasn't quite sure how I wanted to set that out on the page. Okay, so whilst I was completing my sketchbook, I used to watch a lot of YouTube videos for inspo, and this idea for a project coordinator and tracker is from 𝖼𝐿𝐿, and Fletcher's sketchbook was like on a different level, you guys. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely go and check it out. Like, the level of artistry in that sketchbook was just insane. But essentially, the purpose of this was to organise my thoughts and reflect on my ideas from the beginning up until now. And this is it. This is my final design. So here I just included a small section of things that inspired me and other things that helped me make my final design, as well as a rough idea of what my final outcome should look like. Finally, we have arrived at my final piece, and this is what the 2 sketchbooks have been leading up to. So this is an acrylic painting I completed on A2 paper, and I used newspaper to make a collage in the background. The actual painting turned out so good. I was so pleased with how refined the final piece looked. But there was one thing that I wish I hadn't done, and it's that little piece of text on the bottom right that reads, "Should we be worried?" I think that makes the text that I painted on harder to read, but besides that, I was so pleased with how it turned out. The last page of my sketchbook is an evaluation page where I wrote down my thoughts on the final outcome, and I documented the process roughly at the bottom too. And there you have it, my art A-level sketchbook journey. I hope this helps you with your sketchbook, or if you're just watching this for fun, I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. Thank you for watching. Bye.